The life I had built, or rather, the life I had allowed to be built around me, was a structure of careful illusions, and I was its most comfortable occupant. My name is Caleb Mitchell. By trade, I sell insurance in Springfield, a profession grounded in the sober reality of worst-case scenarios. I spend my days quantifying risk, calculating the financial fallout of tragedy, and helping people build a safety net for the unthinkable. The irony I can see now is that while I was expertly navigating the potential calamities of others, a disaster of my own was unfolding in slow motion, right under the roof of my meticulously maintained home. For 7 years, I was married to Genevieve Bennett. She was, and I suppose still is, a brilliant woman. A financial analyst at the prestigious Westbridge Capital, she moved through the world with a confidence I could only ever borrow. She graduated top of her class from Wharton, a fact that served as the final, unassailable point in any argument we ever had about money, ambition, or the vague, undefined future. We met at a mutual friend's wedding, a blur of champagne and bad dancing. I was captivated by her razor-sharp wit, the way she could hold a room's attention with a single, arched eyebrow. What I mistook for confidence was, in truth, an insatiable appetite for the spotlight. I didn't realize then that people who crave the spotlight rarely enjoy sharing it. That fateful Friday began with the mundane rhythm that had come to define my existence. I was closing a decent life insurance policy with a young family, feeling that familiar, quiet satisfaction of providing a small measure of peace in an uncertain world. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Genevieve. "Don't forget Sterling's party tonight. Wear the gray Hugo Boss suit I bought you. This is important." And my stomach tightened. I had, of course, completely forgotten. Her boss, Sterling Vance, the managing director of Westbridge Capital's Midwest division, was hosting one of his legendary soirees at his rooftop villa in Lakeside Heights. The name itself sounded exclusive, a place where people like me didn't belong unless escorted. Genevieve had been talking about it for weeks, framing it as a critical juncture in her career. Networking effectively, she had called it. What she meant, and what we both implicitly understood, was that my role was to stand around looking presentable, a silent, well-dressed testament to her stable home life, while she charmed the people who mattered. After 7 years, I knew my part. I arrived home at 6:15 p.m. to find her already transformed. She stood before the hallway mirror in a sleek black cocktail dress that shimmered under the light, a garment that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She was applying a bold, red lipstick with the precision of a surgeon, her eyes fixed on her own reflection. She barely acknowledged my entrance. "You're cutting it close," she said, her voice a low hum of controlled urgency. "The car is coming in 15 minutes. "Hello to you too," I muttered, loosening the tie that suddenly felt like a noose. I dropped my briefcase by the door. "Had a great day. Thanks for asking." "Don't start, Caleb." The warning tone was immediate, a familiar chill that snuffed out my weary sarcasm. "This isn't just another office mixer. Half the executive board will be there." Sterling specifically mentioned wanting to introduce me to some people. I didn't argue. I just headed for the shower, letting the hot water sluice away the day's stress and the gnawing unease that had taken root in my gut. There had been a lot of important events lately, a lot of moments where Sterling had specifically mentioned things. Somehow, I was never part of those moments beyond my capacity as her handsome accessory. I was the frame, she was the masterpiece. It had been this way for so long that I'd forgotten to wonder if I wanted to be anything more. By 7:30, we were stepping out of an immaculate black Uber into the gleaming, marble-floored lobby of Sterling's building. It was a tower of glass and steel that pierced the skyline, a monument to the kind of wealth I only read about in the policies I sold. The doorman, a stoic man in a crisp uniform, nodded at Genevieve with a flicker of recognition that struck me as odd. "Miss Bennett, good evening," he said. Bennett, her maiden name. A small, unpleasant pinch tightened in my chest. I had always found it modern, a sign of her independence, that she'd kept her name. Now, it just felt like another form of separation. "You've been here before?" I asked as the silent, wood-paneled elevator ascended. She adjusted an earring, a diamond stud that caught the light. "Just for a few work meetings. Sterling sometimes hosts the strategy team here when we're working late." She offered me a quick, perfunctory smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "He says the view helps with creativity." And the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and my breath caught in my throat. The space was less an apartment and more a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living area, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city's twinkling lights. Modern art that I knew, instinctively, cost more than our house was hung on minimalist white walls. At least 60 people, all dressed in designer attire, clutched champagne flutes, their collective laughter and conversation, a symphony of privilege and power. Despite the expensive suit Genevieve had chosen, the one meant to make me fit in, I felt like an imposter. I might as well have been wearing sweatpants. These people didn't just wear wealth, they exuded it. It was in their posture, their easy laughter, the casual way they discussed billion-dollar market fluctuations, and ski trips to Gstaad. It was an old-money confidence you couldn't buy with a nice watch and polished shoes. I had the watch and the shoes, but I lacked the one thing that truly mattered in this room, the unshakable belief that I belonged here. And as I looked around, I realized, with a sinking feeling, that I was the only one who felt that way. A man with silver hair and the tanned, leathery skin of someone who vacations on private islands detached himself from a nearby group and approached us, arms outstretched. Sterling Vance. He had the lean physique of a man who pays a small fortune to keep aging at bay. "Genevieve, you made it," he boomed, enveloping her in a brief, familiar hug. His eyes flickered to me. "And this must be Alan." "Caleb," I corrected, extending my hand. "Caleb Mitchell. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Sterling. Genevieve speaks very highly of you." His handshake was firm but fleeting, his attention already snapping back to my wife. It was a dismissal, so swift and complete, it was almost an art form. "The Tokyo team just arrived," he said, placing a hand on the small of Genevieve's back, with an ease that spoke of long-standing familiarity. "They're eager to hear your projections for the Asian markets. I hope you don't mind if I steal her away for a bit, Alan. Bars over there. Top shelf everything. Help yourself." Before I could correct him on my name a second time, they were gone, swallowed by a sea of bespoke suits and silk dresses. I was left standing alone, a satellite knocked from its orbit. I stood awkwardly for a moment, a statue of social anxiety, before making my way to the bar. A mixologist who looked like he moonlighted as a male model offered me a list of craft cocktails with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. "Just a scotch. Neat," I said, opting for simplicity. "The Macallan 25 or the Balvenie 30, he asked, as if those were the only two options in the known universe. "Whichever's closest," I replied, earning a look of barely concealed disdain. Drink in hand, I found a corner and surveyed the room. I was a spectator at my own wife's life. She was across the room now, the center of a circle of 4 men, laughing with her head thrown back, a graceful hand resting on the arm of a tall, blonde man who looked like he'd just stepped out of a cologne advertisement. She was in her element. Brilliant, beautiful, commanding. And as I watched her, I felt that old, familiar twinge pride mingled with something darker, something that felt unsettlingly like loneliness. 30 minutes bled into an hour. I scrolled through my phone, read the same headlines 3 times over, and nodded politely at passing guests. I decided it was time to perform my husbandly duty, to rescue Genevieve from her colleagues and remind them of my existence. I approached her group just as she was making some impassioned point about cryptocurrency regulations, her hands gesturing animatedly, which is why the SEC's approach is fundamentally misguided, she was saying. They're trying to regulate tomorrow's technology with yesterday's framework. The blonde man was nodding, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that went beyond professional admiration. That's exactly what I've been saying. The decentralized nature of blockchain demands a completely new regulatory paradigm. I cleared my throat. Sorry to interrupt. Genevieve turned, her brilliant smile flickering almost imperceptibly, like a faulty bulb. Caleb, there you are. I was just explaining our position on crypto regulation to the team. She gestured to the blonde man. This is Tristan Keller, our new project manager for digital assets. Tristan extended a hand with the practiced confidence of a man who has never been rejected for anything in his life. Great to finally meet you, Caleb. Genevieve mentions you occasionally. Occasionally. The word landed like a small, sharp stone. I shook his hand, perhaps a little too firmly. His grip was equally strong, and for a split second, something challenging passed between us. In his eyes, a silent, primitive communication between males that predates civilization. No one else seemed to notice. The conversation quickly swirled back to market projections and client acquisition strategies, a language I didn't speak. I was left nodding along, watching Genevieve's body language. She stood closer to Tristan than was necessary. Her back was partially turned to me, creating a subtle but effective exclusion zone. When she laughed at his jokes, it was a full-bodied laugh. A little too loud, a little too enthusiastic. Her hand touched his arm to emphasize a point, lingered on his shoulder as she moved past him. I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't just networking. My wife was flirting, and with an expert's precision, and I was standing right there, an unnecessary piece of furniture, a relic from a previous decorating scheme that no longer matched the aesthetic. After what felt like an eternity, I leaned in close to her ear. I think I might head out soon. Early meeting tomorrow. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes flashed with irritation. Caleb, please don't ruin this evening. Just relax. The night's barely started. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I whispered back, my voice tight. I just feel like I'm intruding on a work function. You're being ridiculous, she hissed, before turning back to her colleagues, dismissing me as easily as if I were a waiter. So, as I was saying about the Morgan Stanley report, I retreated. Defeated, I found my way to an open balcony. The cool spring air was a temporary respite from the suffocating atmosphere inside. The city stretched out below me, a glittering tapestry of a million lives unfolding in lighted windows. How many other husbands were out there tonight, feeling like strangers in their own marriages? I stood there, looking out at the skyline, and a moment of devastating clarity washed over me. I had nothing to do here. This wasn't my world. Perhaps it had never been. I pulled out my phone and ordered an Uber. 7 minutes away. I could endure 7 more minutes. I decided to find Genevieve and let her know I was leaving. A final, futile gesture of adult courtesy. I walked back through the apartment. I scanned the room but couldn't see her. A woman from accounting, Jennifer, or maybe Jessica, appeared at my elbow. Looking for Genevieve? She asked, clutching a martini. I think she and Tristan went to Sterling's office to grab some presentation files, down that hallway. She pointed to a corridor branching off from the main living area. Thanks, I said, heading in that direction. The hallway was dimly lit, the party noise fading behind me. At the end of the corridor was a door, partially ajar. Light spilled from the crack, along with voices. Genevieve's and Tristan's. I wasn't planning to eavesdrop. I was just going to knock. But then I heard my name, and the tone of it froze me in place. If Caleb suspects something, it's a problem, Genevieve was saying, her voice laced with a cool, practical concern I had never heard before. Then we need to be more careful, Tristan replied, his voice lower, more intimate. Or we stop, for now. There was a pause. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then came the words that shattered my life, slicing through my reality like a surgeon's scalpel. I can't, Genevieve said, her voice firm. We made a deal, and you promised you'd take care of everything with the move. And I will, Tristan assured her. The Austin office is practically a done deal. By July, you'll be the regional director for the entire Southwest Division, and I'll be right beside you. But what about Caleb? Her tone was chillingly pragmatic, as if I were a logistical hurdle, a line item on a spreadsheet. Tristan's voice dropped even lower, but the words reached me with perfect, horrifying clarity. What about him? Maybe this is the perfect opportunity for a fresh start, for everyone. My vision tunneled. The sounds of the party, the city, the world, all faded into a dull roar in my ears. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a life. A whole new life, in a new city, built on the wreckage of mine. And I was just the inconvenient debris that needed to be cleared away. Somehow, I managed to back away from the door, my movements silent and robotic. I retreated down the dimly lit hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. I navigated through the party, the faces around me blurring into a smear of unknowing smiles and careless laughter. The music played on. Champagne corks popped. But my world had stopped spinning on its axis. It had tilted, violently, and thrown me clear. The Uber was waiting when I emerged from the building's grand entrance. I slid into the back seat, mumbled my address, and stared out the window, seeing nothing. The driver tried to make small talk about the weather, but my monosyllabic responses eventually built a wall of silence between us. In that silence, I replayed the conversation over and over, my mind scrambling to find some innocent explanation, some context I had missed, some way this wasn't what it so clearly was. There was none. It was premeditated. It was a conspiracy against the life I thought I was living. I arrived home to an empty house that suddenly felt vast and alien. It was no longer our home. It was a museum of falsehoods. The wedding photo on the mantelpiece, us, smiling under a canopy of flowers, frozen in a moment of what I had believed was genuine joy, now seemed like a cruel mockery. The Moroccan throw pillows we'd bought on our 5th anniversary trip, the wall of framed photographs documenting holidays and birthdays, I now had to question. Had she been thinking of him even then? As we smiled for the camera on a beach in Maui, was she already counting the days until she could escape? I went to the liquor cabinet, a piece of furniture we rarely used, and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. I sat in the dark living room, the amber liquid burning a path down my throat, and I waited. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Clarity. Courage. The sweet, numbing oblivion that alcohol promises but rarely delivers. When Genevieve finally came home at 1:37 a.m., I had consumed most of the bottle but felt painfully, brutally sober. I heard her keys in the lock, the soft click of the door closing. "You're still up," she said, her voice carefully neutral as she slipped off her heels. I could detect the slight slur of someone who'd had too much champagne. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." "Couldn't sleep," I replied from the shadows of the armchair. I watched her face, searching for any sign of guilt, remorse, anything that might indicate the woman I married still existed somewhere behind those calculating eyes. There was nothing but a practiced weariness. The party went late. Sterling insisted we stay for a client dinner after. She lied, moving toward the stairs with the deliberate, careful motion of someone crossing a minefield. "I'm exhausted. Coming to bed?" She paused on the bottom step, her hand on the banister. Perhaps she noticed the bourbon bottle on the coffee table. Perhaps she sensed the shift in the atmosphere, the new, heavy silence in the air. "Everything okay?" The question was so absurd, so monumentally disconnected from the reality that had just imploded my life, that I nearly laughed. Was everything okay? Number. Nothing would ever be okay again. But I wasn't ready for the confrontation. Not while the wound was this raw, this gaping. Not while she was this intoxicated. "Just fine," I lied back, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Long day. Go on up." She hesitated for a moment longer, studying me in the dim light. Then, with a small nod, she continued upstairs. I heard the bathroom door close, the sound of the shower running. Ordinary sounds from the most extraordinary night of my life. I remained downstairs, sitting in the dark, until I was certain she was asleep. Then I crept up the stairs and into the guest bedroom. The thought of lying beside her, of breathing in the scent of her perfume mixed with the lingering molecules of her deceit, was more than I could bear. The next morning, Saturday, she behaved as if nothing had changed. In fact, she was unusually attentive. She made my favorite breakfast blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup and asked about my plans for the day with a bright, manufactured interest. The performance was flawless. For a terrifying moment, I almost questioned what I had heard. Had I imagined it? Had the scotch and the jealousy created a phantom conversation? "I was thinking we could drive up to that new winery this afternoon," she suggested, refilling my coffee cup. "The one Jenny told us about. It's supposed to have an amazing view." I studied her across the kitchen island. This stranger wearing my wife's face, moving through our shared space with the ease of an expert actress. Had she always been this good at deception, or was this a recently acquired skill? The thought was chilling. "Sure," I said, my voice a marvel of casualness. "Sounds nice." But something inside me had already broken. It felt like a load-bearing wall crumbling in slow motion, the structural integrity of my entire life compromised. The rest of the house was still standing, for now, but it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. That Saturday at the winery passed in a surreal haze. We tasted overpriced cabernets, our conversation stilted and superficial, revolving around the weather and the wine's oaky notes. Genevieve took carefully staged photos for her Instagram of us smiling with glasses raised, the beautiful valley sprawling behind us. A perfect couple on a perfect day. The lie was so complete, so visually compelling, that thousands of people would see it and believe it. I was a prop in the meticulously curated narrative of her life. Throughout the day, my newly opened eyes saw everything differently. I found myself cataloging the evidence, the red flags that had been flapping violently in the gale force winds of her infidelity for months. I had attributed them to work stress, to the natural evolution of a long-term relationship, to anything but the obvious, ugly truth. There was the new perfume she'd started wearing 3 months ago. A sophisticated, musky scent, far more expensive than her previous one. When had she changed it? Had I even commented? There were the nightly gym sessions. She'd always mocked exercise enthusiasts. Yet suddenly she was a devotee, leaving the office at 6:30 but not arriving home until nearly 9. The gym was a 15-minute drive from her office. The math had never added up, but I had never bothered to do it. And her phone? It was perpetually set to silent, the screen always face down on the table when not in her hand. I remembered the subtle shift in her body language whenever she received certain texts, a slight turning away, a quickening of breath, a smile that wasn't for me. Our physical relationship had dwindled from passionate encounters to perfunctory interactions, often initiated by her after she returned late from a client dinner, as if she were fulfilling an obligation rather than expressing desire. It was all there, a mountain of evidence I had been too blind or too cowardly to see. The following week was a masterclass in forced normalcy. I went to work, sold insurance policies, and made small talk over dinner, all while my mind churned with questions I wasn't ready to ask. I had become a detective in my own home, hyper-aware of her every move. I hated the person this surveillance was turning me into, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening. Genevieve had texted to say she was working late again, the third time that week. I'd stopped at the grocery store on my way home, picking up ingredients for a sad, solitary dinner of pasta and jarred sauce. As I juggled the grocery bags at the front door, fumbling for my keys, I noticed her purse sitting on the hallway table. A sleek, black leather tote I'd bought her for her last birthday. She must have forgotten it in her rush that morning. My keys weren't in my usual pocket. Annoyed, I set the bags down. Thinking they might have slipped into her purse when I'd set my things down at breakfast, I opened the leather bag. No keys. But something else caught my eye. Tucked into an interior pocket was a slim black smartphone I didn't recognize. I stood there in our entryway, the groceries at my feet growing warm, holding this unfamiliar device as if it were a live grenade. A second phone. The most cliched piece of evidence in the history of infidelity, straight out of a bad movie. A part of me wanted to laugh at the sheer, unoriginal absurdity of it all. My first instinct was to put it back, to pretend I hadn't seen it. Confront her directly, maintain some shred of dignity. But dignity is a luxury you can't afford when your life has been revealed as a work of fiction. I took the phone into the living room and set it on the coffee table. I stared at it for 2 hours, my resolve hardening as my heart grew cold. At 9:45 p.m., her key turned in the lock. I remained seated on the couch, the second phone now resting beside me. "Hey, you're home," she called out, her voice straining for a cheerfulness that was painful to hear. "Sorry I'm so late. The Singapore team needed." Her voice trailed off as she entered the living room, her eyes fixed on the phone. For one unguarded, fractional moment, naked panic flashed across her face. It was the first genuine emotion I had seen from her in days. Then the mask slipped back into place, though not as securely as before. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice carefully modulated, low and dangerous. "It was in your purse. I was looking for my keys." "You went through my purse?" A clever deflection. Immediately, she shifted the blame to my invasion of her privacy, rather than the existence of the phone itself. "What is it, Genevieve?" I asked quietly, my voice devoid of the anger I felt. It was a cold, empty calm. She hesitated, her mind visibly racing, calculating the odds, weighing the potential lies. "It's for work," she finally said, her gaze unwavering. "We're testing different corporate messenger platforms for the overseas offices, for security." "On a separate phone?" "Yes." She set her briefcase down, her movements deliberately casual. "Security protocols. They want to ensure the platforms can be completely isolated from personal devices." It wasn't the worst lie she could have invented on the spot. If I didn't already know the truth, if I hadn't heard her conversation with Tristan, I might even have accepted it. I might have wanted to. "Why can't you test them on your work phone?" I pressed, refusing to let her off the hook. Her tone shifted instantly from explanatory to indignant. "Are you serious, Caleb? You're going through my things and now you're interrogating me? Testing my honesty like I'm one of your suspicious insurance claims?" The deflection was masterful. In a single move, she had reframed her betrayal as my transgression. For a split second, I almost felt guilty. Almost. I took a breath. "I think you're having an affair," I said, The words hung in the air between us, heavy and toxic, like smoke after an explosion. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that even she couldn't sustain. It trailed off into an uncertain silence. That's ridiculous. You're being paranoid. Am I? I leaned forward, my voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. Because I heard you. At the party last week, you and Tristan in Sterling's office. I heard you talking about Austin, about your deal, about taking care of everything with the move. The color drained from her face. She stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. In that suffocating silence, I had my confirmation. Every last shred of denial I might have been clinging to evaporated. You were spying on me? She finally managed to whisper, the accusation lacking any real conviction. I was looking for you to say goodbye. Jessica from accounting told me where you'd gone. You misunderstood what you heard. Did I? I asked. Then explain it to me. Explain why you need a second phone, Genevieve. Explain the gym sessions. Explain the late nights. Explain Austin. She sank into the armchair across from me, her defenses visibly crumbling. The performance was over. The curtain had fallen. And there we were, on a bare stage, with nothing left between us but the ugly, unvarnished truth. It's complicated, Caleb, she finally murmured, her gaze fixed on the floor. I'm sure it is, I replied, the calm in my voice surprising even myself. Affairs usually are. It's not just an affair. She looked up, and for the first time that night, I saw something that wasn't a performance. It was a flicker of genuine, albeit selfish, emotion. Tristan and I. It started as a professional collaboration. He has vision, connections. He sees my potential in ways that Sterling never did. The Austin opportunity is career-defining. And somewhere along the way, you started sleeping with him, I stated. It wasn't a question. She didn't deny it. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now you're planning to move to Austin together. The transfer isn't final yet. That's not a denial, Genevieve. She stood up abruptly and began to pace the room, a caged animal. What do you want me to say? That I made a mistake? Fine, I made a mistake. But this opportunity… Stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. This isn't about a career opportunity. If it were, you would have discussed it with me, your husband. This is about you and Tristan planning a new life together and trying to figure out the most convenient way to discard me in the process. That's not fair. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that I barely recognized as my own. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've spent the last 7 years believing we were building a life together while you were apparently just biding your time until something better came along? It wasn't like that, she insisted weakly. We were good together once, but people change, Caleb. We want different things now. We? I asked. Or you? She had no answer for that. The silence that followed was heavy with everything left unsaid, with the ghosts of 7 years of a shared life that was now revealed to be a solo performance. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the charade. I'm going to bed, I said, my voice flat. The guest room. And I suggest you sleep on what you want to tell me about the second phone, because we both know it's not for testing corporate messengers. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling of the guest room, replaying our entire relationship like a movie I'd misunderstood the first time around. All the scenes were the same, but now I had the director's commentary, revealing the hidden motivations, the secret subtext. The morning brought no clarity, only a bone-deep weariness and the cold certainty that my marriage was over. Genevieve had left for the office before I woke up. A hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter about an emergency meeting was the only indication she hadn't simply fled in the night. The second phone remained on the coffee table, a black monolith of secrets. In the harsh light of morning, my resolve hardened. I needed to know everything. The passcode, I guessed on a whim, was my birthday, 1024. The irony was so bitter it might have made me laugh if the situation weren't so painfully absurd. The phone unlocked, and there it was, a parallel universe where my wife existed as a different person entirely. The messages were abundant and explicit, a running chronicle of her betrayal stretching back nearly 6 months. Conversations with Tristan about which hotels were the most discreet. Plans for weekend getaways disguised as work conferences in Chicago and Denver. Strategies for concealing their relationship from colleagues until the Austin transfer was finalized. And then there were the photos. God, the photos. Genevieve in hotel rooms I didn't recognize, wearing lingerie I'd never seen, in poses meant only for his eyes. My stomach churned. There was a photo of Tristan, shirtless and smiling, in our bed. Our bed. The timestamp was from a Saturday afternoon 3 months ago. I had been in Columbus for a 3-day insurance conference. My hands were trembling as I navigated to the voice messages. I played the most recent one, recorded just 2 days before the party. Tristan's voice filled the silent room, confident and conspiratorial. "Hey, General, just got off the phone with HR. If everything goes smoothly, we'll be in Austin by the end of the summer. Sterling signed off on my end this morning. Alex doesn't suspect a thing, right? Good. By the time the transfer is announced, it'll be too late for him to interfere. Just think, babe, this time in a few months, we'll be celebrating in our new penthouse. No more sneaking around, no more lying about late nights, just us, building the life we deserve." I dropped the phone on the couch as if it had burned my hand. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted, dragging the last shreds of my denial down with it. The life we deserve. The person I had shared my life with for 7 years, the woman I had promised to love and cherish, had methodically and ruthlessly been building a new life, a better life, from which I was not only excluded but was considered an obstacle, a problem to be managed, and then discarded. For 3 days, I moved through my life in a fog. I went to work, smiled at colleagues, sold policies, and attended meetings, all while carrying the crushing weight of what I now knew. The evenings at home with Genevieve were a grotesque pantomime of normalcy. We made small talk about our days, avoiding each other's eyes, the second phone on the coffee table, an unspoken accusation between us. Neither of us acknowledged it, nor my continued residence in the guest room. The house was a Cold War zone, thick with unspoken tensions. I didn't confront her with the new evidence immediately. The rage had subsided, replaced by a strange, cold clarity. An emotional outburst was what she would expect. It would give her an opening to play the victim, to frame me as the unstable, jealous husband. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I made an appointment with a lawyer, not for a dramatic confrontation or a hasty divorce filing, but to understand my options, to protect myself. Martin Schaefer was an old client of mine, a man whose specialty was family law and whose reputation for discretion was unmatched in Springfield. I sat in his wood-paneled office, the smell of old books and leather strangely comforting, and laid everything out for him. The overheard conversation, the second phone, the messages, the photos, the planned move to Austin. I spoke calmly, factually, as if I were presenting a claim report. When I finished, Martin leaned back in his chair, his expression a mixture of professional sympathy and quiet appraisal. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Caleb," he said, his voice gentle. "Unfortunately, it's a story I hear all too often, though usually not with quite so much premeditation." "What are my options?" I asked, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. "Well, that depends on what you want. Reconciliation is always possible, though given what you've described." He trailed off diplomatically. "Not interested," I confirmed, the words firm and final. He nodded, unsurprised. "Then we prepare for divorce. Missouri is an equitable distribution state. The court will divide assets fairly, but not necessarily equally. Given the infidelity and the clear evidence of, let's call it financial misappropriation for her affair, we can make a strong case for a division that favors you." "I don't care about the money," I said, the words coming out automatically. "Everyone says that at first," Martin replied kindly. "But you should care. You've invested 7 years of your life in this marriage, supporting her career. Don't let anger or pride cause you to make poor financial decisions." We spent the next hour discussing strategy. What to document, what to avoid saying, how to prepare for the separation. When I left his office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that night at the party, a sense of control. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was mine. I had a plan. That evening, I returned home with a purpose. Genevieve was already there, standing in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if we were still a normal couple. "I made that chickpea curry you like," she said as I entered, her voice overly bright, her movements jittery. "The one from the cookbook your mother gave us." "Oh." I watched her for a moment, this woman I had thought I knew so completely, performing normalcy with a desperate edge. Without a word, I walked to the kitchen island and placed a manila envelope on the granite countertop between us. She stared at it, the spatula frozen in midair. "What's that?" she asked, though her eyes told me she already knew. "Divorce papers," I said quietly. "Drafts, for now. along with printouts of select conversations between you and Tristan. And hotel receipts I was able to find linked to a credit card I didn't know you had, and a few photos. I've been quite thorough. The spatula clattered into the pan, spattering curry onto the stovetop. You went through that phone, she whispered, an accusation, not a question. Yes, I replied, my voice steady. Just as you went through our marriage vows. Her face crumpled for an instant before hardening into a cold, defensive mask. You had no right. Probably not, I agreed. But I needed to know what I was dealing with, the full extent of it. 7 months of messages, 12 different hotels, 3 weekends disguised as work conferences, and one very detailed plan to relocate to Austin as regional director, leaving me behind like outdated technology. She flinched at the precision of my accounting, at the undeniable evidence that there was nowhere left for her to hide. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said finally, her voice small. How was it supposed to happen, Genevieve? Were you going to tell me about Austin after it was a done deal? A fait accompli? How considerate. She turned off the stove, the curry forgotten. She turned to face me, her facade cracking. What do you want, Caleb? To punish me? To make me suffer? Will that make you feel better? I don't want to punish you, I said, surprised to find it was true. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a vast, empty space. I just want out. I want a life where I'm not an inconvenience to be managed. I want to be with someone who sees me as a partner, not a problem to be solved. And then, unexpectedly, she began to cry. Not the calculated, manipulative tears I had seen her deploy in arguments past, but genuine, body-shaking sobs that seemed to surprise her as much as they did me. Caleb, I was wrong, she managed between gasps. It was a stupid, reckless mistake. I don't want to lose you. We can fix this. Couples therapy. A fresh start. Please. I had imagined this moment, her breakdown, her pleas. In my fantasies, I had felt vindicated, triumphant. But in reality, I felt only a profound and bottomless sadness for all that had been lost, and for all that had never truly existed in the first place. You know, Genevieve, I said softly, my voice filled with a weariness that went soul deep. I was blind for a long time, but now I see everything so clearly. I looked her directly in the eye, and I do not want to be where they do not respect me. I do respect you, she insisted, reaching for my hand across the island. I stepped back, just beyond her reach. No, you don't, I said, not with malice, but with the simple finality of a closed door. You haven't for a very long time, if ever. And that's okay. I don't need you to respect me anymore. I just need you to look at the papers in that envelope and let me go. In the end, Genevieve signed the papers without a contest. The hard way, as I had laid it out, involved sworn testimony, the public disclosure of her affair with a colleague, and the very real possibility that Westbridge Capital would be drawn into a messy divorce proceeding right before a major corporate restructuring. Her ambition, the very thing that drove her away from me, was the lever I used to secure my freedom. She chose the path of least resistance, the path that best protected her career. It was the most predictable thing she had ever done. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. By that time, I had heard through the grapevine that she and Tristan had indeed relocated to Austin. Their grand plan, however, had hit a snag. The promotions they had anticipated never materialized. Apparently, word of their affair and the potential liability it represented had reached the ears of the executive board. Westbridge Capital, it turned out, did not appreciate having its senior management's personal drama become a corporate risk. I sold the house. There were too many ghosts in its rooms, too many memories that had been tainted by the truth. I used my share of the proceeds to move into a downtown loft apartment with exposed brick walls and high ceilings, a place I had secretly coveted for years, but that Genevieve had always dismissed as too urban. For the first time in a long time, my living space felt like it was truly mine. I changed jobs, too. I left the large, impersonal firm I had been with for a decade and joined a boutique agency specializing in insurance for tech startups. It was a new world, dynamic and uncertain, and my combination of traditional insurance knowledge and a newfound appreciation for life's unexpected volatilities proved to be surprisingly valuable. I was good at it. I felt valued. Sometimes, in quiet moments, usually late at night when the city hummed below my window, I still wondered if I could have seen the signs earlier. If I had been more attentive, less complacent, could I have prevented the pain, salvaged something worth keeping? But those moments grow less frequent with time. They are being replaced by a dawning recognition that what was broken wasn't just our marriage, but the very foundation upon which it was built, a foundation of unequal ambition, unspoken resentments, and my own willingness to be a supporting character in someone else's story. This story isn't really about betrayal, though that is its most obvious and painful feature. It's about insight, the harsh, necessary clarity that comes from seeing things as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. It's about how a person can lose himself by trying desperately to hold on to someone else's lies. And it's about the quiet courage it takes to let go, to release what never truly belonged to you in the first place. I heard through a mutual friend that Genevieve and Tristan lasted less than a year in Austin. Their relationship, forged in secrecy and ambition, apparently couldn't withstand the harsh glare of reality. Their professional reputations were tarnished, and their personal choices had imploded spectacularly. Last I heard, she was in Chicago, rebuilding her career from a few rungs lower on the ladder. As for me, I'm dating again. Cautiously. I'm learning to trust others, yes, but more importantly, I'm learning to trust myself, to trust my instincts, my perceptions, my own worth. I'm rediscovering the man I was before I became Genevieve Bennett's husband, a man who enjoys simple things, who is content with his own quiet successes, who doesn't need a spotlight to feel seen. Sometimes you have to lose the life you planned to find the life that's waiting for you. Sometimes the most devastating losses clear the way for the most authentic gains. And sometimes what sounds like the end of your story is actually just the beginning.